Hello, everyone. Happy Friday. This is Oren here. I'm the CEO and founder of Pioneer B1, and we are very, very happy today to record a webinar about administration and usability for SAP Business One. We are very, very fortunate to have today one of the top speakers related to SAP Business One. We have Cristina Ramirez on the Cristina is the SAP administrator at Gaumard Scientific. She's one of the popular speakers at ASAG events. And during this presentation, please feel free to engage through asking questions. Through the chat is probably best, but if you have, we're going to open the lines at the end of this session towards the end. So with that being said, Cristina, thank you so much for joining us and presenting this great webinar. And I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thank you, Oren. Hello, everyone. My name is Cristina Ramirez. I work at Gaumard Scientific. I'm an engineer and MBA, and I've been managing SAP Business One since 2014 for Gaumard. To tell you a little bit about Gaumard Scientific, we actually, let me see if I can switch my screen here. Okay. We are a fascinating company that develops medical simulators for healthcare education. Medical simulators are used in schools, hospitals, even across the military to train doctors and students to practice specific skills on mannequins before they actually get to a real patient. Some of our products include this guy over here. His name is Hal. He actually connects to real equipment. You see there, he's hooked onto a real respirator and he has a 12-lead ECG. So these mannequins interface with real equipment. We also have some trauma simulators that experience amputations and they bleed. They have pulses. They speak. We also have this baby simulator. He's a newborn baby. And he turns blue, he cries, he has muscle tone. They're quite marvelous, these products. One of our primary or most popular products is Victoria. She's a birthing simulator, guys. She gives birth to another mannequin. It's crazy. And we also have a pediatric, one of our newest simulators. He has a bunch of really cool features, like he follows you with his eyes, a little creepy, but he does a lot of really cool things for the medical industry. All of these products are manufactured here in-house from the plastic, and we have ovens here that make the plastics, and we assemble them here. We assemble the electronics, and we also have a programming or software developers that create the software that controls these mannequins. These are controlled by tablets, and so as you can see, our simulators are quite complex and our manufacturing process is as complex to reflect our products. And we've had to make a lot of adjustments and I guess customizations to SAP Business One to make it work for us. At the same time, while I guess exploring and using as many out-of-the-box features as we can from the software. So today, during my time with you, I actually want to go over some of the tools that we've used in the software to improve operational efficiency, increase user confidence in the software, enhance some management control, and make the software Gaumard's software. So it's SAP Business One, but with a Gaumard twist on it. Some of the things that I'll cover more specifically, they include form settings, the UI configuration template, formatted searches, shortcuts, automatic alerts, activities, approval procedures, some enhancements in 9.3 on the license administration module, user groups, and user setup. And what I'd like to do for the remaining of our time together is I'm going to jump straight into SAP Business One, and I will show you all these features one by one. If you have any questions, let us know. I know that Oren will be monitoring those, and will stop me if needed.
I will sure try.
Okay. So one of the first things I like to show you, let me show you here my Business One environment. One of the first things that we started doing when using SAP was customize the forms. A lot of the forms in Business One have a lot of information. Some fields we don't necessarily use. And so we started decluttering some of those forms to help the users focus only on what they need to see. And one way that we've been able to accomplish that has been by removing fields, renaming fields, hiding them all together, and even disabling them whenever possible. So one of the first things that I want to mention is how to change the name of a field. It's very easy, actually. If you hold down the control key and have your cursor in a particular field, you can double click on it while holding down the control key, and this window shows up, and you're able to rename the field. It may not seem like much, but if you're repurposing a field that is meant for something, but you're actually going to use it for something else, it's a good idea to change the name. And you can just change it as easy as that. And then it changes for everyone, for every user across the board. As you can see, this field right here, it's called something else, foreign name, and we reused it to identify our previous ERP systems ID. This was back when we first started SAP Business One. And so we changed the name, and as a recommendation, I put a little squiggly line or some sort of differentiator to know that I've changed the name of the field. And so you'll see those across my interface, because that's a reminder to me as the admin that we've changed the name. Just to look, you don't have to do that, obviously, but it's a recommendation that was given to me and I followed, and it's been really useful. So you can rename the fields. Obviously, you can, if you want to highlight one of them in particular, because it's important that the user fills it out, you can make it bold, for example, so it stands out in the form. You can also go to Tools and go to Edit Form UI, and it takes you to this form editor that we have loved since it was introduced. You can actually highlight or select any field and hide it. If you don't use fax anymore, you can hide it like so. This is probably the best tool we've used to declutter some of the information in the forms that we're not using. You can also make a field inactive or disable it. So let's say that you have a group of users that it's okay for them to see the phone numbers, but you don't want them to be editing that. So you can, again, right-click and disable, and by the same token, you can right-click and enable it again. So it's a feature that you can turn on and off as needed. You can also move fields to the main screen. So I know that if you have a lot of UDFs, you may want to bring some of those fields into the main form because you don't want them to be having to open and close the UDFs or for whatever reason. So you can actually now hold down a field and just move it to the main form like that. And if you want to move it back, you can right-click on it and restore to default, and it'll be sent back to the UDF form. So it's a very cool tool to customize how it looks, and it helps users incredibly to just be able to focus on what they need to focus and see only what they need to see. You can also add tabs. So if you do that, you can create a tab, and on that tab, you can add your fields from the UDF, or you can move things around. So you get the idea. It lets you customize not just the BP master data form, but any form that you're on by simply going to Tools and hitting Edit Form UI. So it brings this form in edit mode so that you can make changes. I'm going to leave that, and I'm going to move on to the configuration template. Now, you don't have to make these changes one by one, user by user, there is a tool called the UI configuration template that is found under Administration, Utilities, and it's right here. It's called UI configuration template. And in here, you can create groups of templates that you can assign to users and now to groups of users as well as of 9.3. And what you can do here is if you go to any particular document, you can make the changes and it'll apply those changes to all the users that you have associated to that group. So this is a good tool to use if you're wanting to apply changes to multiple users at once, right? So you don't have to do all these manual movements and hiding and disabling on a user by user basis. You can do them as a group. Very useful. The only recommendation and something I found that may not work for you is, I'll give you an example. When we do equipment, when you move fields from the UDF into the main form, if you do them through the configuration template, let me show you what happens. I'm just going to grab a couple here. I've wrestled with this, so I don't want you to have to go through that. So I'm just going to show you. This tends to happen if you do it through the UI configuration template. For some reason, when you save it or when you move a UDF from the UDF window into the main screen, you may find that that happens, like the label gets hidden or moved. The way that we've been able to avoid it is by simply doing the changes on a one-to-one basis. So I know it might not be the best solution, but until SAP works that out, it is my recommendation that you go to the users that want to have those fields move and you move them one by one. So that when you have it, oh, well, it didn't work this time either. So usually it stays, the label stays with it. There's a strange behavior there. So you may want to report that as well as I, so that they can fix it quickly. It's the only really downside of moving UDF to the main form. The labels sometimes disappear.
And Cristina, we have a couple of questions here, people getting excited. Yeah. One of them, if this is all base SAP features, which is yes, we're not presenting any add-ons or extensions today. And the second thing is, I think you may have answered that. Please always tell us which things apply to all users and which are for the user making the change only.
Okay, so if you do it through the UI configuration template, through this form here that I'm going to create a group and show you how to do now, the changes will apply to all the users that are selected here. Okay, now if in my case I am not associated to any group, so I simply went to the form, to tools and edit form UI, and the changes that I make on myself like this by going to tools, edit UI, only apply to me. And that's an authorization based role. So you don't have to have all your users have access to this. I happen to have access. Let me see if I show you. I have a separate user here that I'm going to use later. And if she wants to edit this form and she goes to tool, edit form UI, she gets this, permission override. So that's something that is on an authorization level. You can have open access or you can restrict which users have access to edit their forms. Did that answer the question?
Yes, I believe so. Thank you, Cristina.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, the next thing I wanted to show you was the use of formatted searches. We have gotten into the habit of customizing many of our forms for either quicker data entry or for some on-demand reports on the actual forms of SAP. So if I have, for example, on my item master, I have quite a number of these magnifying glasses, and what they are is a query that's saved to a field so that when I click on it, I get some sort of feedback from the system, and it allows me to do something about it. So for example, I have one here on my inactive remarks that when I click on it, it gives me a list to choose from. We do this to standardize the kind of comments that go into our inactive remarks fields. And, you know, it allows you to have a choose from list. So that's one, I guess, form of doing formatted searches. We also do some where you can do on-demand reports. Another example is our purchasing department knows a lot of the part numbers by the way that they order it from the vendor. They may not always remember the actual SAP internal number. So what they do is we created a formatted search for them that it's a query. When they click on it, they can enter part of the BP catalog number or the number that they buy, you know, with. And when they click OK, it gives them a suggestion of, okay, all these part numbers have those two letters as part of a BP catalog number associated with it. So it lets them look at it and see, okay, well, this is the one that I needed to look at. And now that they can go in and review it. We also have other reports like, let's see, on the BP master data, our sales reps can click on this magnifying glass for the formatted search and enter, let me click on it, enter a date range, and it'll tell them how many BPs or the BPs that were converted from a lead to a customer within that time range. And, you know, it's something quick for them, quick access. It gives them valuable information when they need it. So this is just to give you a few ideas of the power of formatted searches. You can put them on any field, anything that you can query, you can save as a formatted search and make it easily accessible to a customer from the form. It's an alternative from having to go to tools, queries, user queries, and then having them to select from a particular group, especially if they have the cockpit, which I'll discuss you know, further in a few minutes. One, I guess, comment I'll make is that some users, if you have these users with you, may accidentally, I don't know how, but Pickers Display. So I went to View, Pickers Display, and UDF, and they'll call you to tell you that they don't have any magnifying glasses anymore for their formatted searches. So that's just one thing to look at. You can enable or disable that access. So to be able to click on the magnifying glass and see a report.
The other thing too, that in case you don't see the magnifying glass, is to do Shift F2. That will open the same query on that field.
Okay, yeah, exactly. Thank you, Oren. Speaking of shortcuts to queries, SAP has three main ways that they that I've found to create shortcuts to different forms. One of them is the cockpit, which you've seen I have enabled, where I have my common functions area, and I can actually move anything that I need into the main screen like that. And if I don't need it anymore, I can remove it back like so. The cockpit allows you to create a new category, for example, for open documents. If you click on the settings button over here, you can enable the different things that you may want to show up on there. So essentially, this filters your open items list in a way to the particular documents that you have, and it gives you a number of, you know, of documents that are open. When you click on it, it opens to the open items list already filtered by, you know, whatever condition you had set on here. So this is another, you know, easy tool to have quick access to some lists that are already available. One of my favorite things is to be able to dock the messages and alerts window. You know, this is a pop-up when you don't have the cockpit enabled. This window takes over your screen when a new message arrives, and sometimes you're in the middle of something, and I in particular rather have it in the background because I clean it up periodically as I work through them, And when a new one comes in, I know because there's text here. So up to you, but you can, move it or remove it from, actually, let me close it like this. From the widget gallery, you can just drag and drop it into your main screen, and you'll be able to have it docked in your main screen if you have the cockpit enabled. To enable the cockpit, you have to go to Tools and click on Cockpit and have this checked. If you don't have it checked at the moment, it's going to ask you to exit and come back in SAP in order to reflect the settings. And if you don't have a cockpit enabled, it's going to look like this, where you have the main menu to the side, and these three options up here: modules, drag and relate, and my menu. This is another way to create shortcuts to your screen. I'd say that the only limitation to this is that you can't assign crystal reports to your my menu, but you can do queries. So if your user, one way that I kind of recommend users whether to have my menu or the cockpit is based on what kinds of reports they run. If they run more based on queries, then I suggest for them to have my menu, because I can add queries to my menu like this, and they just run it quickly, as opposed to having to go to Tools. Oh, sorry, I picked something and it's, loading there, my report, my query, as opposed to having to go to Tools, Queries, User Queries, and then Finder Queries. This I find is a little bit lengthy to approach a query, but a lot of my users don't have the query manager because I don't want them to delete stuff. So if they use a lot of queries, I technically let them use my menu. If they have a lot of crystal reports or for anything else, I let them use Cockpit, at least as a recommendation. Obviously, they can choose between the two, but it's up to them. I think this is a crystal report that I have running here. And I picked a date range that doesn't work, of course. So if the users use a lot of crystal reports, then I would recommend the Cockpit, because they're just one click away. So just some options. The third way that you can create shortcuts in SAP is through My Shortcuts. If you go to Tools and you go to My Shortcuts, you can enable different function keys on your keyboard, right? F2, F3, F4, so that when you press them on the keyboard, it automatically brings up a form. For example, if I press down F2 on my keyboard, it's going to bring up the BP master data. So when I do that, it just brings up the BP master data. If I press down F3, it's going to bring my authorizations, etc. The way to configure that is pretty easily. You go to Tools, My Shortcuts, and you click on Customize. And then here you select the F key that you're going to assign, and then you go through the modules. So if you wanted to do a service call, you can do that, find it, allocate it. And when you go to the list, you'll see that my F11 has now become a service call. So when I press F11 on my keyboard, the service call form is going to come up. Some users like to have at least one function key because it's the one thing that they do often, and it saves them from having to click on it. So just options: my menu, the Cockpit, and shortcuts.
Hey, Christina, one note about the cockpit. If you are a user and you don't see the cockpit enable option, there is a chance that might be an authorization, or as an administrator, you need to you need to activate it on a company level. So if we go to administration, system initialization, general settings, there will be a cockpit tab that allows you to check this cockpit and enable it on a company level.
Correct. So that has to be enabled at the company level. But if it's enabled, and when you go to Tools and Cockpit, this is grayed out that you cannot click on it, talk to your system admin, because it's an authorization-based option. Maybe they can enable it for you, or they can clean it up or open it up so that you can enable it or disable it. You can try it out and see which one you like. Another quick note about the Cockpit. that I just remembered is you can have different, I guess, decks of things. I actually created one for our meeting today. The one that I usually work on is this. I have specific things related to system admin stuff on my forms, but because I'm doing a little bit different today, I created a brand new cockpit called presentation where I have all the forms that I'm going to be using throughout the presentation so that I have quick access to it. So, you know, they come, you can have one for sales, service, finance. So you can create different shortcuts. If you if you're more of a visual person where you rather have, you know, things visually available to you all at once, that's a better option than having to go through all of these menus to select and click on your things. So just another tidbit about cockpits there. I also want to talk to you about automatic alerts. So you saw already that I have quite a number of alerts that are running, and we have a variation of them. Some of them are to remind us, for example, of expiring warranties. Our reps get, I think it's a monthly notification of the warranties that are expiring that month. We also have some alerts that are generated based on things that people may have done wrong so that we can catch a mistake when it happens. And some of these mistakes are not as critical, so a transaction notification or a block is not necessary. It's okay if we know after the fact so we can address it. So for example, an address, when one of our users enters a VP address without a state, it's not something that's going to stop anybody from working, but we want to know that it happened so that we can fix it. So we get an alert that tells us, hey, this VP doesn't have you know, a state or a zip code or whatever condition you want to label it. So some of our alerts are also used to catch some of these mistakes. Some others are more procedural to know or to remind people that something happened so that they know that something has to take place after. And an alert is really a query that you schedule to run every so often. That's the best way I can describe it. And if you go to administration and click on alerts management, you're able to create a brand new alert. So I'm just going to go to one in particular. Actually, let me show you my list so that you get a sense of how many we use, right? So we have different ones going on for different things. And depending on which one, right, there'll be a different, of course, I picked one that didn't have a query. You associate a query from your query manager. So the first step is to create a query that's going to generate some results that you save it on this alerts management. You select the users that are going to be reminded of their results when it runs, and you schedule the frequency. Do you want it to run every hour, every day, every week? We have some reports that run monthly, some that run weekly. And if you do it every day of the week, you can select, or every day you can select the time. If you do it weekly, you can select which day of the week and the time. So you have different options, and depending on the type of report that you're running, you have the ability to set all these parameters that are going to help you run, you know, the system smoother for your needs. One new thing that was introduced with 9.3 was that you're now able to add groups of users to the alerts. So it used to be that you can only select a number of different users at once, and that was it. Now, through the user groups that I'll discuss towards the end of the presentation, you can associate users in different groups. And instead of having to click one by one for the users, you can actually just go to groups and select a given group, and it'll apply that alert setting to all those users. So another useful tool that we use extensively, and when it breaks, when it stops working, we find out pretty quickly. In fact, one of the ways that I know that it's not working is when I don't have any alerts here. The way I work is I have all these reminders of things that I need to do, and if I work on them, I will delete them. So at any given time, if I don't have anything pending, this will be empty, and my list is not empty very often. So that's one way I know that maybe the alerts are not, you know, the service is off. And speaking of that, one thing that I've learned is that if the results of a query are more than, I think the number is 470 rows, then the service will stop and then you have to go and reset it. So that's something that the system admin can do for you. But just as the word of warning, it happens. It's one of the things that will stop the service from running. Okay. The next thing I wanted to discuss was activities. And I think this form in SAP, this module, that by the way, in 9.3, they've grouped it under CRM, but it's always been under BP Master Data activities. It's one of the forms that I feel maybe, I don't know if it's underused, but we're definitely using it to the extreme here at Gaumard, because it's very flexible. It's just a way to document a specific event. And because it's so flexible and allows so much customization, we're using it for a number of different things. Our reps are using it to document their CRM activities, so their sales calls, their meetings, their demos. We're using it for technical support to request equipment, for customers to be put on waiting lists, for scheduling trainings, for doing warranty inspections. And one of my favorite ones is expenses. Our reps and our field employees, they capture their expenses through a very simple activity. So they would typically do this. I'm gonna pretend I'm one of our reps. They fill this out, right? And then they do expense category and they put a total amount, and then they add the activity. Then that gets that gets approved or denied by a supervisor. Incidentally, through the form settings, we've disabled this field for our reps so that they are not able to approve their own expenses, but their supervisors are approving them. And then all the approved expenses weekly are sent in a form of a report for accounting to pay out. So they were using in the past some applications, some mobile apps like Expensify and some other things. But because our needs for capturing expenses were basic, we just wanted to see the category, the amount, and they attached the receipt, a copy of the receipt on this activity. Because that was really the extent of how we wanted to capture the expenses, we found that the activities was able to do that. And so the reps discontinued using all the different formats that they had. Some had Expensify, some had some other applications, some were using Excel. And we've standardized the recording of expenses into one module that everybody has access to, viewing access to, and accounting just gets one report with all that information. So that's just to give you an idea. You probably have things in your business that are unique to the way you do things. And I think the activities module can provide room for making this form flexible for you, to capture those things that are unique to you. So just throwing that out there. There's a report that's based on the activities. Well, first of all, you have my activities. So every user can look at just a list of their activities, and they can toggle on and off the things that are open and closed. They also have a way to do an activities overview, which is a very specific search on the various categories. So here you can just do, show me what's open, show me what's closed. You can also, if you have any service calls related to the user, you can also do that through here. So combines activities and service calls. And my favorite one is the activities overview because it lets you do a very specific search on the activities module. And because we use it so extensively for so many different things, this has turned out to be a very useful tool. So give it a thought. Maybe there's some business process that you have that can be simply captured with this module. Explore it. The next thing I wanted to discuss was the approval process. It used to be called approval procedure, but they've changed the name in 9.3. It's now called approval process, but functionally nothing changed. And that is found under administration and approval process, right? And an approval process is a way to trigger an event, an approval event from one user to another. So you can schedule approval procedures for maybe entering orders or quotes that need to be approved because of a discount or for a particular condition that you want to meet. And we found that this is a powerful tool, and as of 9.3, it allows documents to be edited even after they've been approved. So that's been a really good thing. The way it works is you create a stage, and an approval stage is nothing more than specifying who's authorized to approve this process. So I'm going to create one right now just to show you. So I'm going to do one for sales orders, sales order discounts. I'm going to do a simple one. And then I am going to say that I am the authorizer. Right? So that's, as the extent of this form is just to say, okay, for this approval procedure that I'm going to create on the template, I want this person to authorize it. You can have a list of as many authorizers as you want, and also how many, if there's a group of people that need to authorize it, if you need at least 2 out of the 3 people to approve it in order to go through, you can do that here. So gives you a little bit of flexibility to that. I'm just going to create a simple one where I am the authorizer. Then the next thing you need to do is actually create the template. So in the template is where you say which document is going to trigger which user, and what is the condition that needs to be met in order for that approval process to get started. So I'm going to call it sales order discount, and I'm going to say that this other user that I have opened up in another session, when she creates, if you go to Documents tab, when she creates an order or any of these documents, as you can see, I have to, or my sales order discount person, which is, if I click on it, you'll see it's myself, has to approve it. And then on the terms, you say, okay, is it every time that Melanie enters an order that I want this approval process to be triggered, or do I want it to be when a specific condition is met? So I'm going to choose the second one, when a specific condition is met, and I'm going to say when the discount is greater than 10%, just to give you an example. Notice here at the bottom that you're able to have a more customizable criteria by building a query. So this tool, it's not only limited to what's the options that are available here on the top, you can create your own. So when a condition is met, whether it's a preset condition or a condition that you describe in a query, you can trigger an approval process. Yeah. So I'm going to add it. Mm-hmm.
And that query will actually just look for true or false. So if it's true, it will go through the approval procedure.
Right. So let's do a little practice run here. I'm Melanie now, right? I logged on as her user, and when I go to the sales order, I'm gonna just create a simple sales order. Let's say today's a delivery date, and I'm going to create. Actually, I'm gonna do it down here. A 15% discount on this order. And when I click add, it's immediately going to say you need, this document is triggering an approval process called sales order discount, and you can put in the remarks, right? You can say, please approve, or, the reason why you're requesting this discount, for whatever reason. So you notice that my order wasn't really added. It was added as a draft, right? So if you have the draft report under my name, or under Melanie's, you'll see that here's the document. When you add it, it says pending, because it's now sending a message to the authorizer that this has to be approved, and it'll say draft. So this document number hasn't been committed to the order yet, and it'll say pending. When the authorizer approves it, receives a message to approve it, then you'll be able to hit add. If I try to hit add right now, it's going to tell me, it's pending. You can't add it. So let's go here. And if I come here, you'll see that, on my user, I have a request for approving document generation that was just triggered a minute ago saying, hey, this document is pending approval. So I can actually look at the document itself and see, okay, she's trying to apply 15% on this order. That's okay with me. So I can, from this window, go to decision, click approved or rejected, obviously. You could do that too. Type in some remarks, update it, and then hit OK. So if we go back to Melanie, she'll get a notification when that happens, and we can wait for it to come. But I just want to quickly show you before the notification even gets here that the actual document now has changed. It still says draft, but it's moved from pending to approved. And if I go ahead and click add, it goes, it actually adds the document. So there's a lot of room for creating different procedures that have to be authorized by particular users. A very powerful tool.
Yeah, and one of the things in 9.3 version is that they made this tool a little bit more usable by adding the ability to have that procedure work also on updating a document.
Right. Okay. I also wanted to talk to you about some enhancements that in 9.3 that are available through the license administration. Well, the first one, I don't know what the average size of users you're managing, or if you're just a user, maybe this won't impact you so much, but we actually have more than 100 SAP Business One users here at Gaumard, and managing their licenses gets a little bit painful in 9.2 because this window is this size and it doesn't resize. And you have to, just go through the users and move around. It's a little bit painful. So as of 9.3, you can actually resize this window. You can always filter by users. So to narrow down your list, again, this is only useful to you if A, you're managing other users, and B, if you have a lot of users. Because if you just have a handful, this might not be painful. But I did want to show you that this enhancement can make your admin's life easier. And then we have this tab under assignment, which is probably one of my favorite things. I think it was introduced in 9.2, some PL level in 9.2, where you can actually look at your assignments of licenses by user. So you can filter, for example, one thing I do is I filter by all my locked users. These are the users that are no longer with us. And if I see that there's any license, stranding over one of those users that are no longer here, I know that I can reassign it or that I can free up that license. The other thing that I like to do from this filter is to just look, if I just wanted to look at all my professional users, I can do that and just see in one short list, okay, these are the ones that I have professional licenses. Because in assigning a lot of different license types, sometimes I click the wrong one. It happens. So anyway, it's a quick tool to let you manage your users and their licenses. That's a little bit better than what it used to be before. The next thing I wanted to discuss was user groups, and this was introduced in 9.3. So if you're not on 9.3, you won't see this. It used to be called authorization groups in 9.3, but it was a limited functionality. As of 9.3, they've grouped all the groups that have to do with authorization, but also now with alerts, form settings, and the UI configuration templates that I showed earlier today into this one form called user groups. And you can switch between these options. For example, these are all my authorization groups that I have. And as I click through them, I have a different number of users assigned to them. Also, you can now create alerts for groups. So, or groups for alerts, I should say. So if you're creating a lot of automatic alerts, you may want, instead of just selecting user by user who's going to receive them, you may want to assign a group, associate users to a particular name, and have the alerts or the particular alert send the results out to the group of users. And you can do the same with form settings, and you can do the same with your configuration templates, or you can create sort of like a master group that applies to all of the ones previously discussed. So the benefit of this is when you're managing a user, you can actually now apply a lot of settings at once that, you know, are applicable to different forms in the system. And speaking of users, this window in 93 was also updated or enhanced. There's some settings here that now used to only be company specific. I think now they're user specific. So if you're managing users, you'll be able to look at this user setup window and change a few settings. But also if you're a user, you can click on this on 9.3, you can click on this icon, My Personal Settings, and based on your authorizations, you'll be able to change some of those settings yourself, like display or send an alert for activities scheduled for today. So when you first open SAP, it can give you an alert for all the ones that are scheduled for today without having to have a reminder set for them. You can display recurring transactions. I mean, just different settings that now the user is able to have access to from their SAP form.
Yeah, what users really like is what happens in different users have different screen resolutions, and the ability to control your size, font, color from here is essential and really helpful to the somebody administrator the environment.
Right. For this picture, for example, I like to have this logo on all the users. And I used to have to go one by one to select the picture from general settings. I had to, you know, do it, log in as that user, have those settings configured, and then be able to, you know, let the user sign on for the first time. This has made my life easier because now from the user setup, I can do all of those settings from my user and just push out those changes to the user. And obviously, if they want to change it themselves, like their font size, which some users complain about, depending on the size of the screen that they're working on, they can do that themselves. They don't have to rely on somebody else to do it for them. Okay, any questions?
Kristina, before we open it for questions, could we take a moment to go through the tooltip option?
To go through what option?
The tooltip.
Oh, tooltips. Sure. I don't remember where they are, but I can discuss it briefly. So the tooltip is really when you are in any form. I guess I should probably, let me go to an order. I think a sales order is a good place to start. So a tooltip is a little caption that comes up when you hover over a particular field or document. So let's see. For example, this that shows up, contact person, that has that summary of information, that's called the tooltip. So depending on where you're pointing at, it's going to give you a summary. The cool thing about being able to modify this setup is that you can decide what shows up. For example, if I go to my BP code, it's showing up the code, the name, the type, foreign name, some BP currency, and some other information. That's because when I am here on my business partners, those are the things that I have selected on my tooltip. So it allows you to show what you want to show and then declutter the things that you don't want on there. The only drawback I think I found, and I don't know if it has been fixed, is that this functionality is only available for professional licenses. So if you are a CRM or a logistics license type, you won't be able to edit the tooltip. I don't even know if that you'll be able to see it. Oren, can they see the previews?
Should be able to see. I don't think it's a license limitation, and we can reach out to SAP.
Okay. Okay, so that was the only thing, but it allows you to, you know, every time that you're previewing item master data, you can select which fields you want. You know, if you don't want to see all of these, maybe you just want to see a couple, you can easily unselect some of those options, and then, you know, when you hover over it, you see less information displayed. And I don't remember where you can find the tooltip preview. It's probably under administration somewhere. But you saw that I usually use the search under my menu to find things when I don't know where they are.
It's under
So that's
administration,
what that.
system initialization, the last option under system initialization.
Oh,
Yeah.
there you go. Yeah. So either that or you search for it, but that's how you would change it.
Great, thank you. Any?
Sure. Let me. Oh yeah, sorry, I interrupted there. Let's go over some of the things that we talked about. That way, maybe if you have a question, it'll come up as you review what we've talked about today. So we talked about changing the form or the look of SAP to make it more focused to what the users need to see by either renaming fields, moving them, hiding them, creating tabs, and moving them to the main screen. Just changing the way that the form looks to allow your users to focus on what they need to focus and not on all this extra information that they may not need to perform their responsibilities. We also talked about the fact that you don't have to do these changes on a user by user basis. You can actually create groups that will allow you to push some of these form settings to multiple users at once. We also talked about the benefits of formatted searches and how you can schedule either write lists or queries and associate them to particular fields on the screen so that you have quick access to on-demand reports or to help you save some time in data entry by doing some of those lists. We talked about the 3 ways that you can create shortcuts to forms in SAP. By either configuring a cockpit, my menu, or having the function keys enabled to open up certain predetermined forms. And we also discussed what can help you identify if you're going to be a My Menu user or a cockpit, because those 2 shortcuts don't work together. You either have My Menu or you have a cockpit. And I think the determinant, at least for us here in Gaumard, is if you're a heavy query runner, if you run a lot of queries, then you want to use My Menu. But if you have a lot of crystal reports, then you can go the cockpit route. The other way is if you do both, you can save some of those queries on the forms like we showed you with the formatted searches so that you don't have to depend on My Menu and you can run those reports on demand from different forms in the system. We talked about alerts and how you can set them up through the alerts management. We talked about some of the different examples that we use here at Gaumard. Some of them include reminders to do things, procedural alerts, or alerts that remind us that something went wrong that we need to fix, or some data entry that's missing that we can go back and address. We also talked about activities, how we use here in Gaumard activities for a large number of different types of things. And I focused a little bit on expenses because we standardize that, the expenses across the board for our sales reps and our technicians, and they're not relying on any special feature or any special mobile app or anything else that they have to pay. We're using SAP out of the box to capture that. So we're saving ourselves some money and we're still keeping organized. We also talked about the approval process and how you can schedule it for various forms for different conditions, both some that are out of the box preset in the system or some that are query based. And we talked about how the query is looking for a yes or no answer, and when the condition of the query is yes, it'll trigger the approval process. And I showed you briefly the enhancement on the license administration for 9.3. And although the filtering by user and the assignment grid are available as of 9.2, I believe, but the resizing of the window is only for 9.3, only relevant if you are managing a lot of users or if you're managing users at all. And then we talked about user groups and how they've combined some of the authorizations and have now created groups for alerts, for form settings, and even UI configuration templates under one place called user groups. And we also talked about the user setup and how now end users can have quick access to their personal settings, to resize their screens, the resolution, and just make some changes that in prior versions they had to reach out to the admin to do those changes for. And that's it. Any questions?
Any questions? There was a question in the chat by Brandon. Dashboards doesn't work with Cockpit either.
What the dashboard? What dashboard? The
I think I have replied. I think he's mentioning the dashboards, the graphs on the Cockpit. With the SQL version, there are few graphs coming with that. You could enable that, but it needs configuration, a technical configuration of B1I, which is kind of behind the scenes. So if you do want to enable your dashboards, you may need some help on the B1I.
yeah, I think
Okay, thanks, Oren.
I think let me see if I can show you on my current environment. I think we were able to get that going, although you probably can do better graphs with crystal reports. I think was my my take on it. Let me see if I can get it going here. I've used them in the past, but yeah, I guess there's a little bit of a configuration setup that you have to do ahead of time. I've got to work at some point, but I'm not sure anymore.
Yep. Second question is from Diane. She asked, can I copy an existing user to a UI template, or does it have to be created from scratch?
To a group? You mean to a new group?
Yes. Like, I think she's asking if you already edited the form of a sales order to a specific user, put it in the UI template for all users, or do you need to create a new UI?
You have to create a new UI, a new configuration template. You can copy the settings from one user to the other by going to users. And for example, if I have, if I click copy form settings, I can select, oh, look at that, now to even groups as well. So when I click on copy, it's going to transfer my form settings into those others. But for any newcomers, instead of having to just assign them to an existing group, you would have to do this setup that I'm doing right now. I don't know if that makes sense. So I think long term, you may want to invest the time to create the template so that when you have new groups or new users, you can just assign them to an existing group. It's kind of like when they decided to do the authorization groups, you were always able to copy settings from one user to the other. But every time that you get a new user, if you don't have an authorization group for them, you have to do the copy to, copy from one user to the next. So I think it's better for managing, from the management perspective, to go through the trouble of creating the group with the settings that you want first, and then it's as easy as just adding a person to a group. And when a change happens, you only make the change once.
Thank you, Cristina. One more question from Hema. How to hide a field in a matrix using Edit UI configuration?
I usually use the form settings instead of the Edit UI. So let me go to sales order. I presume you are referring to this. So if I wanted to stop showing this BP catalog, you can come to form settings over here. If I click on the right thing, form settings, you can go to table format and then just as easy as disabling it. And then it goes away.
But you can also do that from the UI template as well, right?
I'm not sure. I don't think so. I think you can only disable the whole grid, or I think if it's a column, just one column, you have to use form settings for that. With the Edit UI, which I am on right now, you can hide or disable the whole grid. But I don't think that the question was that. I think the question was for a particular column.
Yeah, she's asking, she's clarifying the question. I want to hide item cost field for all salespeople. So I have to, I want to hide item cost field for all salespeople. So I have to do one by one.
Where is this, on which form?
In like a
on the
sales
sales
order, I think.
But the sales order doesn't have,
So
I think it's on the form settings that she's talking about. So on here, if you have one of these columns that have cost, is what I'm guessing it is. If you go to form settings, table format, let me see. Is there something here for cost?
We have a comment from Karina that she was able to add or hide columns using the UI form too.
Okay. So one way is if it's a column, for sure, you can disable the, I just don't see the cost here. I don't know if maybe she has it, but if it's a column, if you go to, with the sales order open and you go to form settings, you can certainly hide it altogether. Like any columns that you don't want to see, you can hide.
Yep.
Right? That's one way. And then I think Karina confirmed that you can do it through Edit Form UI. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I've seen that, but I don't see how you can get past that.
Hey.
Right? I'm clicking grid. So anyway. Oh, give control. Here you go.
Yeah. First, we had another comment from Karina. Thank you, Karina, that there is an authorization to block the item cost. The other thing is when a user does have a UI template assigned to that controls also this screen. So you could manage that from the UI template, and that will apply here on the form settings as well.
Right. So you mean which columns are showing and which ones aren't? You can associate that to a template.
Right. Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So when you do go to the UI configuration template and you edit something, you could also decide which columns are going to be presented here.
Can you click on one of those columns? Oh, I see what you're saying. I see. So you do form settings on the template here itself.
Right.
Yeah. It's the same thing as going to form settings and.
Yep. And I think Hema said thank you. So it seems like we're good. Any other questions?
I had a question about the alert section. When we were talking about alerts, is there a way to set up an alert? We use down payment invoices pretty extensively. And is there a way to set up an alert so even if the down payment invoice doesn't actually change, but the underlying payment means gets canceled or something like that, and it basically makes the invoice open, is there a way an alert can be set up so that I can be made aware of that? Because the actual document itself hasn't been changed. It's something else that's been changed.
Yeah, I mean, it's the way you would write the query. As long as it's associated with the transaction, you could write a query of the down payment that is associated with the invoice and bring the information about those invoices, right?
Okay.
Yeah, Christina, any other thoughts related to this question? Christina may be unmuted, but all right. Any other questions?
Is it possible that we could go back through or we're able to run reports from a formatted search?
To run
Run the query?
reports on a formatted search, yes,
The query.
absolutely, absolutely. What
I don't think I got it in the it was going too fast.
yeah. First, we have recorded that, so you can always get back to that. But
Okay.
for example, what we have done for some clients is, when you look at the business partner, you could assign a field to show, year-to-date sales versus last year-to-date sales, and you can associate it with or by month and things of that nature. You can associate it with any fields, and then hit the magnifying glass to open a query, a report, or things of that nature.
Okay, so we can only assign one at a time, right?
Right, right.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Sure. Sometimes we do a union query when you need to see multiple information, so you can do union and present multiple information, but it will be one query assigned with one field. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm. Any other questions? Okay, so with no other questions, I want to thank everybody, and a special thanks for Christina, who I think in the past 3 minutes lost her audio. So thank you.
I'm back.
Oh, you're back.
Thank you for taking over there.
Sure.
I don't know what happened.
Christina.
All right, thank you guys. Feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions or suggestions.
Sounds good. Christina, thank you so much for a really great webinar. We will continue that continuous education on a monthly basis, and if anyone have a suggestions or a feedback or topics that you would like us to discuss in the next session, please feel free to write to us. So with that being said, happy Friday, have a great weekend everyone, and we'll be talking again shortly.
Thank you, Oren. Have a good one.
Thank you.